Hello chess friends and welcome to the Chess channel and welcome back to the World Chess Championship in 2021. So we're following now of course the epic battle between the world champion Magnus Carlsen and the challenger Jan Nepomniachtchi. We're now in the round 11 of the super event, which means now that this round 11 could be already a decisive round because still of course 4 games have to be played, but if Magnus Carlsen wins only one more game, then the World Chess Championship is over, then Magnus Carlsen is staying the world champion in chess. Let's check out now what happened. This was again really, I'm not sure how to explain, but this was really a wild round. This was really a wild game. What happened in the round 11, be prepared, it's probably even the wildest game so far. So let's check out now what happened. e4 here played by Nepo, we have e5 by Magnus, we have knight to f3, and after knight to c6 we have bishop to c4 here by Nepo. So he's playing now the Italian game. The Italian game is slightly sharper than the Spanish game that we have seen so far. So Nepo played so far always the Spanish against Magnus Carlsen's response of e5. The Spanish game is more positional, and we have seen that Magnus Carlsen is faring very well when he's playing the Spanish game. I'm not sure how to explain, but it seems to me that Magnus Carlsen is almost unbeatable in the Spanish game in classical time format chess. When he wants to, he's playing simply solid positions, and he can simplify the position very easily, which I think doesn't fit for Nepo, who of course needs now a win in this match. So here after move bishop to c4, we have now a new opening. Now you see with the move bishop c4, the game is much sharper because the light square bishop is attacking of course immediately the pawn on f7. So knight to f6 has been played here by Magnus Carlsen. You could go now into this knight's attack, which would be I think the most dynamic of all Italian games that you can play, but Magnus Carlsen played now here after move Nepo played here move d3, which is I think the most solid way. It's now the classical or the normal system here by Nepo. So we have here now bishop to c5 by Magnus, which is now the so-called gioco piano. Gioco piano is the symmetrical setup here by the bishops, and both players have this really powerful bishops. That's I think the main strength of the Italian game, also for black, also for white. You see the bishop on c5 and also the bishop on c4 are the most powerful minor pieces on the board. So that's why you understand I think the main strategy what white and black are doing here, because what they're trying to do is get rid of this very powerful bishops, which is I think a normal idea in chess. You want to just undermine your pressure by trading off maybe your bad piece for your opponent's good piece. For instance, you would love here from black's perspective maybe to give up your light square bishop for this powerful light square bishop, because it's aiming of course against this weak f7 square. So that's why here I think we'll understand what's going on the board now in the continuation of the game very easily if you understand of course the power behind these two bishops. So after move c3, here we have d6, we have now castling, and now the move a5, which is of course a preparation to stay a little bit longer with your dark square bishop here. You're not allowing your opponent to play the move b4, then of course b5 could be an opportunity, kicking away also further the knight. So that's why a5 so far a blockade idea, and which is allowing now, as we said, black to stay a little bit longer with the bishop on c5. So we have now rook to e1. This is now a normal Italian game. Also this is a normal move in the Spanish game. Knight to g4 doesn't bring you so much. It can be met with rook to e2, so everything is glued together, everything is pretty much protected. So this knight to g4 seems like a dangerous idea, but actually it is not. So here after move rook to e1, we're announcing that we could maybe try this one, knight to d2, knight to f1, knight to g3, and then we want to of course maybe here from white's perspective to occupy the weak f5 square. From black's perspective, you would love also maybe to occupy the f4 square. So these are the clear targets in any symmetrical position. You want to simply occupy the squares that are supported by the centralized pawns. Also the d5 square could be an object. From black's perspective, you see the d4 is not possible so far to occupy because the c3 pawn is protecting the weak square d4. So these are the tiny little things that we have to understand I think in the Italian game. So here in the continuation, we have now bishop to a7 played by Magnus Carlsen. We have now knight to a3, which seems like a strange idea to play the knight on the edge of the board, but actually this is a preparation to play knight to c2 and then bishop to e3. As we said in the beginning of the video, we're trying to get rid of this most powerful pieces of our opponent. So here in the continuation we have h6, we have knight to c2 castling, and now comes this idea, bishop to e3. You see, bishop to e3 is, I think, a great positional move. Now after move bishop to e3, you can take with the knight, and the problem is now it's not the problem, sorry, it's the good thing is that you don't have to recapture here with the pawn. You don't have to mess up your pawn structure. Now in the continuation of the game we can expect, I think, even a d4 pawn break. So far good opening prep by Nepo. We have now rook to e8 here by Magnus Carlsen. We have a4 here, and also bishop to e6. So Magnus does the same. He is getting rid also of this very powerful bishop, and now after move bishop to e6 and rook to e6, we have now two knights versus two knights middle game, which is now of course playable for both sides, but of course with a slightly maybe advantage for white, because white has always the opportunity maybe to break through immediately with the move d4. And also what we can notice, the rook is really on a natural square. The rook is on e6, so it's of course not supposed to be there. The rook should be actually connected with this other rook, so that's why in the near future we can expect maybe Magnus Carlsen losing one more tempo in order to connect back the rook. So here we have queen to b3, we have b6 protecting the b7 pawn. We have now rook from a to d1. You see, pretty good setup here by Nepo. Again, d4 as the main strategical goal, knight to e7, and now h3, preventing some ideas in the near future, maybe to this knight to jump on g4. We want to play freely with this knight. In the continuation we have queen to d7, and now knight to h2. We have rook to d8, knight to g4, and here after move knight to g4 we have h takes g4. Here Nepo found, I think, a decent way how to spice up the game further, because he's targeting now the weak f5 square. As we said in the beginning, these are the squares that we're trying to occupy now with the move knight to f5 and the potential here knight takes f5. Here Nepo has the opportunity to recapture with a powerful g pawn, and then he could have really a brilliant space advantage on the fifth ranks. But Magnus probably calculated everything here, and he knows his stuff, and he's probably has played several times maybe a similar position like this, maybe not the same, but a similar. He knows how to get his pieces connected. You see how compact his setup is. That's, I think, the beauty of Magnus Carlsen's play. He never creates too many weaknesses for himself, so it's not so easy to attack Magnus Carlsen here after move h takes g4. Now Magnus is saying, okay, you built your powerful f5 control, but now you lost a little bit the battle in the center because you prepared this move too much. You prepared simply this knight outpost on f5 for too long. Now with the move d5, Magnus is breaking in here in the position. So here after move d5 we have d4. We have now e takes d4, and here after e takes d5, the game becomes really wild. But with the main idea, what white and black should do, probably here trade off more pieces, trade off more pawns in the center of the board, and the game should probably end in a draw. But Magnus Carlsen decides to spice it up further. He plays now the move rook to e4. We have now queen to c2 here by Nepo, and now rook to f4. Now comes really the critical moment of the game. Here Nepo has to make this move. Nepo has to play rook takes d4. This move maybe Nepo didn't like because of the fact that you will be left with an isolated pawn, but that's actually not such a huge problem, because if a rook to d4, here c takes d4, knight takes d5, you can take knight takes d5, queen to d5, but you can also take out this one, and okay, Nepo will probably lose also this pawn. But now after move b3, I think this game should lead in the draw, because here you can maybe take, but here you could lose maybe the battle on the 8th rank. So far you have to first play with your rook somewhere, but then maybe afterwards you can attack the g4 pawn. But you see, I'm not sure how to win this game for whites or for black's perspective. So as I said, this line should probably lead into a simple draw for both sides. But after move rook to f4, as we said, rook takes d4 was the correct move. Here Nepo makes again a huge blunder. We have seen so far that Nepo is blundering very much in this super event. He played two great blunders against Magnus Carlsen, and then Magnus Carlsen won 2 games. Now after move rook to f4, Nepo played the move g3. G3, huge mistake here by by Nepo, because it gives now Magnus Carlsen the opportunity to play really a wild tactic. And I think we missed a little bit the tactical Magnus Carlsen. Here Magnus found the best way. He played simply d takes e3, sacrificing the rook for the exchange. Of course Magnus took the knight, but Nepo can of course take the rook. We have now g takes f4, but after queen to g4 we have now the move king to f1. And whenever you calculate tactics, it's I think sometimes very annoying to calculate everything, but sometimes you have a feeling, sometimes you have I don't know, your intuition when you're playing a tactical shot like Magnus did here. And we can notice now that Magnus has now taken a pawn, taken a knight for the rook, which should be, I think, let's count, a knight should be worth 3 points, a pawn should be worth 1 point, so it's only 4 points. A rook should be worth 5 points, so it means in a mathematical way Magnus lost the exchange. But when we follow our intuition, when we follow the position, and when we include other elements into our tactics, which is now the endangered king, which is to also evaluate the endangered king position of Nepo's king on f1. We should also evaluate here the position after e takes f2, knight to f5 are opportunities, rook to d6, rook to g6 are opportunities to include more pieces into the game. So in the endangered king gives, I think, here a huge advantage for black. And actually here the position is already plus 5.5 for black. Believe it or not, this is already losing here for Nepo. So that's why when we calculate, I don't know, pure material, as we said, our rook is worth 5 points, but a knight and the pawn are only worth 4 points. But it's not easy to calculate it like this. Now we should really evaluate the endangered king position here of white king. Now it's a much better continuation here from Magnus. It's almost a position that white could actually resign. But let's see now what happens. Now Magnus Carlsen has several choices. First, Magnus plays the correct move, queen to h3, and there are now only 2 ways how to defend yourself. You can play king to g1 or king to e2. In the continuation, Nepo played king to g1, but let's see what happens if you play king to e2. King to e2 is not so good because of this one. E takes f2 is a new forcing move. When you're on the attacking side like this, you should play always forcing move, which means now you should play moves which are forcing your opponent to react. King takes f2 is of course not an opportunity because you get queen to h2, you lose the queen on the second rank. So that's why you have to be careful. After move e takes f2, you could maybe try this one. You can try rook to f1, covering like this, but now after move knight to f5, look how these pieces are so very well coordinated, how they're glued together. First of all, what we can notice, also the e3 is a huge target here. Now it's even a checkmate threat, so now white would be forced, of course, to play the move queen to d3, but now with rook to e8, you have to move the king somewhere. You can play maybe here king to d2, but now with the knight to g3, again, the game is basically over because we're threatening simply here also to take, and also we're threatening some knight to e4 at this. You could try maybe here king to rook takes f2, but as we said, knight to e4 is now huge threat. After king to e2, actually you should not go in front of the rook, because if you do that, then again knight to c5 is happening, and then you can only cover with the queen, and again it's simply game over. So you could maybe try here king to c2, but it's not even better because of this simple tactic. We should now simplify the game, slow down the pace of the game. Queen takes d3, rook takes d3, and now knight to f2 is simply winning the game. So that's our continuation after this move, rook to f1. You could also try rook to h1 in order to maybe attack the queen, but now there is this threat, queen to g2, with a threat of f1 promotion here, and also which would come of course with the direct check. So that's why you would be forced again to play the move rook to f1. But now after knight to d5, we see that also knight to f4 are threats, again queen to g4. So too many tactical possibilities. For instance, in this position the evaluation is plus 11, so it's something that, as I said, white should resign. So here queen to f5, here again you see how these pieces are so very well glued together. Here in the continuation we are threatening again this move queen to e3 after rook to f2. You see also rook to e8, for instance, is an opportunity. You have to step back from the defense of the rook, and now again you lose a material here. Knight to e3 is also an opportunity to take out the queen. So this was our analysis after move king to e2. So Nepo realized that he should not go towards the center, because then the rook becomes also a great attacker against the king. So that's why Nepo played king to g1. But now Magnus played, I think the first inaccuracy, he played now the move knight to f5. Knight to f5 is actually not the best of moves here for the world champion. The best move here is first to take. He takes f2. Here you have to play again a forcing move, but now after queen to f2, a rook to d6. Rook to d6 is simply winning, because you can play queen to g2, but now after rook to g6 you simply lose the battle here on the g file, and it's something that again white needs to resign. So that's why here, as I said, with the move knight to f5, Magnus missed now this move. E takes f2 with rook to d6. Rook to d6 would be a brilliant move, this rook lift, in order to include the rook on the g file. Is, I think, simply game over here for Nepo. So after move knight to f5, Nepo realized that this rook is coming into the game, so that's why the only way to prolong the game somehow, still it's a much better position for Magnus. So for instance, the evaluation here is about +3 for black, but here after move knight to f5, Nepo realizes, oh man, I have to play d6. I should not allow here the rook to come into the game, so that's why good defensive move here by Nepo, d6. So here we have knight to h4 by Magnus. Also queen to g4. Queen to g4 is, in my opinion, again a slightly better move. It is again forcing something to do. You can also take c takes d6, but now after move queen to g4, again you're creating new checks. But okay, Magnus played knight to h4. We have now here f takes e3, which is again a must move, because you have to cover your g2 square. The checkmate threat was here present around the square g2, so that's why f takes e3 is opening up now the second rank. It is protecting at least white for a while. So here the continuation, we have now queen to g3, we have king to f1, we have knight to f3 here by Magnus Carlsen. He's threatening now a very tricky move, knight to h2. Then you would be forced again to give up your queen, so that's why here queen to f2, covering everything. And after queen to h3, we have queen to g2, and now Magnus Carlsen decides to simplify the game. He missed, I think, some tactics. He missed the clear tactics, which could, I think, have easily win here for Magnus. But now after move queen to g2, here still it's a much better continuation, but it becomes actually a rook and pawn ending, which are of course very hard to play. So here after move queen to g2, we have king to g2, and now knight to e1, we have here rook to e1, and after rook to d6, we have now this endgame, which is again much better for black, but it's not so easy to play, because we see only 6 pawns on black side, we have 5 pawns on white side, and many times we have seen that this rook and pawn endgames are leading into a draw. So you should, but we know of course, while Magnus Carlsen is playing this endgames, he's a very tough player when it comes to endgames. So let's see now what happened. I think he played now really a decent endgame. He probably saw some maybe more complicated tactics, but missed easy wins. I think, as I said, if for instance if he would have lost the game, I think that Magnus Carlsen will be frustrated and missing easy tactics. But now from rook to d6, he simplified the game, he slowed down the pace of the game again. Only black, I think, can win this game, so that's why I think at least Magnus has a draw here. So here after move rook takes d6, we have king to f3, rook to d2, attacking the b2 pawn, rook to b1, and now g6, creating also some roots here for black's king. We have now b4, we have a takes b4, and after rook to b4, now rook to a2, attacking also the a4 pawn. Maybe here also rook to d6 is an opportunity to maybe get your pieces protected, because here after potential rook to c4, you could actually play here some moves like c5 and protect your b6 pawn. But okay, here after move rook to b4, Magnus, as I said, played the move here rook to a2, and now of course Nepo plays with the king towards the center, which is now a good move by Nepo. He has to include all of these pieces into the game, so now the king should not be tolerated as something that you should protect. Now after move king to e4, the king is playing an active role in an endgame. So after move king to e4, Magnus plays now the correct move h5. h5 is of course the best move. You should really try now to at least stretch your opponent, because when you start to push pawns, then the king is going also after that pawn, then the rook has to also step back from the attack. So that's why this move h5 is announcing that Magnus Carlsen is not allowing here Nepo to play very actively with his pieces. So So after move h5 here, Nepo tried again to include the king into the game, but Magnus simply played rook behind the pawn, which is now the so-called Tarash rule. We should bring simpler rook behind our enemy's pawn. Here in the continuation we have rook to b3, and after move h4 we have rook king to c6. Now Magnus is starting to push this pawn further. Really brilliant endgame technique. You see now the beauty behind every move here by Magnus Carlsen. h3, we have now king takes c7, h2, rook to b1, trying to protect, of course, here the first rank. Now after move rook to c3 we have a check, and here Nepo tried king takes b6, but it creates now a new opportunity for Magnus, because Magnus played now a beautiful deflection motif, deflects the rook from the pawn, and now after move here rook takes b3 we have now the promotion, h1 promotion of the queen, which is now of course completely winning endgame. Of course Nepo has here this pass pawn, but in the near future we can expect some checks, and as I said, this is a +7 position again here for the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So Nepo tried a5, tried to spice up the game by pushing some pawns, but if Magnus Carlsen of course plays now again this endgame correctly, then it's simply game over here for Nepo. So after a5 here, Magnus includes the queen into the game, plays queen to e4. Nepo played a7 the queen. Now Magnus Carlsen creates a check, and now a tricky move here by Nepo, king to a8. Probably he was hoping for that Magnus plays maybe something like queen to d8, and of course it's winning suddenly for white, because after trades of pieces, now this pass pawn is of course winning for Nepo. But Magnus Carlsen is very focused in this super rank. After move king to a8, here Magnus played first king to g7, slow down the pace, showing I have everything under control. I'm not allowing you any chances. King to g7, brilliant move again. I think many of us would simply rush into this simple tactic, play simply check and lose the pawn. Not Magnus Carlsen. He's, as I said, very focused. In every game that he had a slight advantage, he converted that win. So maybe this wasn't the best of Magnus. We expected maybe a more dynamic Magnus, more attacking Magnus, but now he's showing that he's still a great player. He's still the best player in the world. After move king to g7 we have rook to b6, and after move queen to c5 in this position Nepo resigned, which means that Magnus Carlsen is the world champion in chess. Again, congratulations Magnus Carlsen. I think it is deserved because of his focusing style. He's playing very correct chess. He's playing very solid chess, really hard to break. Nepo had his chances, we have to say it. Nepo who could have won the game 2, game 6 also, very tough games. So he should have converted that into wins. Then he would probably force more Magnus Carlsen to play more aggressive chess. So as I said, it's him to blame. Magnus Carlsen converted his wins, used his chances, and is now still the world champion in chess. Congratulations again. I'm sure that there are many Magnus fans, there are many Nepo fans. I'm a little bit sorry also for Nepo fans, because Nepo played really the great game 2, great game 6. Still this 2 games I think will be very important for him, because then afterwards I think psychologically Nepo was down. He couldn't get back into the game. His mental skills were not so great anymore, and Magnus Carlsen, we have seen him now through every game. He's sitting like really a great player there. He never stands up. He's so focused. I'm watching his live streams on chess.com or chess.com or chess24. I'm watching him always, his reactions, and his reactions are so calm. He's so he's played this moves in such a smooth way. So that's why, as I said, he's still the best player in the world. We'll see who will be the next challenger. I'm hoping for that. Maybe we'll see the next World Chess Championship, maybe between Alireza and Magnus Carlsen. That would be, I think, most epic battle of all time. So let's check out now the current ratings also for Magnus Carlsen, because I think he gets some rating points. Let's see, let me just move that a little bit. So Magnus Carlsen has here, okay, let me see, +5, so he still got some ratings, although he played many draws. He has now 2,861 rating points, which is still, I think, a great thing. He's far away maybe from his record, but still he gained 5 rating points. We have seen Alireza Firouzja is on the 2nd place, so maybe in the near future we can expect the future battle between Magnus Carlsen and the 2nd best player Alireza Firouzja. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the World Chess Championship. Maybe we have expected a little bit more, but still it was a great and epic battle with 4 wins by Magnus Carlsen. Congratulations again. And this is it for my coverage. I hope you enjoyed the coverage, and in the near future we can expect, of course, also the near the future. We have this rapid time format chess World Chess Championship, but also the Blitz World Chess Championship, and I think I'll cover also these 2 very cool events. So that's it from me. See you with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.